ancients called it. In the distant past, there have been highly advanced technological civilizations based on this extraterrestrial knowledge. A golden age, as the ancients called it. Around 450,000 years ago, the Anunnaki arrived, a reptilian race led by the winged, albino white Draco, and they sought to take over the planet. It is probable that they had by this time also settled and occupied Mars. For a long time, the Anunnaki lived openly as reptilians, but for whatever reason, possibly hostility from other extraterrestrial races and humanity, they literally went undercover. They set out to hijack the planet by appearing to be human. This included a crossbreeding program which created human-reptilian hybrid bloodlines through which they could operate from the lower fourth dimension. The fourth-dimensional reptilians wear their human bodies like a genetic overcoat, and when one body dies, the same reptilian moves house to another body and continues the agenda into another generation. You could think of it as wearing and discarding spacesuits. These creatures are the ones the psychics see as reptilians inside human physical bodies. It seems that they need to occupy a very reptilian-dominated genetic stream to do this, and certain bloodlines always end up in the positions of power. Other less pure crossbreed human reptilians are those bodies which are possessed by a reptilian consciousness from the fourth dimension, and these are people who psychics see as essentially human, but overshadowed by a reptilian. The crossbreeding to infuse reptilian genetics into these bloodlines makes this possession far easier than for those with fewer reptilian genes. This is why the Brotherhood maintains such detailed records of the genetic lines. They then know which people can be possessed more easily than others. The reptilians seek, however, to influence everyone by stimulating the behavior patterns of the reptile region of the brain: hierarchical thinking, aggression, conflict, division, lack of compassion, and a need for ritual. By ritual, I don't just mean dressing up in a satanic ceremony. There are many examples of the human obsession with ritual, including doing the same things at the same time, day after day, week after week. The reptilians have used the white race as their main route to global control, but they have crossbred with all races, including the Chinese, Japanese, Arabs, and those known as Jewish. All this allows the reptilians to control apparently unconnected people and organizations. It is the extraterrestrial version of members of the same secret society working in many places of influence, while the rest of the population have no idea that they are connected. You can look at a series of apparently different human beings in different positions of power who come to the same conclusion and agree the same policy. That would appear to be a policy born of democracy and open debate. But what if the same force is controlling all of them? That would then be dictatorship, but unless you knew the true situation, how could you tell? This is what is happening with the reptilians working through human bodies and the secret society network these bloodlines have created or infiltrated. The Book of Enoch says that those born of the Nephilim blood, the reptile-human hybrids, are, because of their ancestral spirit, destined to afflict, oppress, destroy, attack, do battle, and work destruction on the earth. 58. In other words, those bodies can be possessed by their ancestral spirit, the reptilians of the lower fourth dimension. In the United States, there is an organization called the Sons of Jared, named after the father of Enoch. They pledge an implacable war against the descendants of the Watchers, who as notorious pharaohs, kings, and dictators, have throughout history dominated mankind. In their publication, The Jaredite Advocate, they condemn the Watchers as like super gangsters, a celestial mafia ruling the world. 59. Many people ask me how today's Brotherhood elite can cause such death, destruction, and suffering, without showing any emotion. At least some of the reptile genetic streams do not appear to feel emotion like humans, and they seem to be far more ruthless, too. I've just described George Bush, Henry Kissinger, David Rockefeller, and so on, and that's not surprising because they are examples of the reptile race at work in the human sphere. What I have outlined in this chapter will astonish even most of those who have followed my work and supported it over the years, and I understand that. But I have learned from enormous, and at times extreme, experience to follow the flow of life and go where it takes me. When I feel the rhythm of life, I dance. When I hear it speak to me, I listen. I go where the music takes me, no matter how incredible it may be or what consequences it may have for my life. For those who haven't tried that yet, you will be amazed at what an adventure life suddenly becomes, what knowledge you can access, grasp, and understand when you go with the flow and cease to wage war with it for fear of being different. For most people, so often the head gets in the way because they fear stepping outside of convention. They fear what other people will think and say about them. But how can you expose the unthinkable unless you think the unthinkable? Are we saying that we know it all? Is there nothing left to know? Of course there is. We know only a fraction of it all. And what has been the force that has brought us even to our current state of knowledge? Those who have dared to think and communicate the unthinkable. Without such people, the human race cannot evolve, it just runs on the spot, living within a perpetual prison of the mind. What was that they said? Humans will fly. Ridiculous. That we can travel beyond the speed of sound. Crazy. That we can create babies in a test tube and clone the human and animal species. Ludicrous. Yet all end. More have been done by those who have thought the unthinkable while the masses mocked. Give it a try before you forget how to do it. Think beyond the bounds of what you are told is reality. To refuse to do so is the ultimate prison cell, the ultimate mental and emotional stagnation, the ultimate control. Indeed, it is the way we have been controlled since this whole scam began. Sources 1. Dr. Arthur David Horn, Humanity's Extraterrestrial Origins, E.T. Influences on Humankind's Biological and Cultural Evolution, A. and L. Horn, P.D. Box 1632, Mount Shasta, California. 2. Jason Bishop 3, Matrix 2, compiled by Valdemar Valerian, Arcturus Book Service, USA 1990, P96 3. Rev. John Batherstein, The Worship of the Serpent, J. G. and F. Rivington, London, 1833. 4. Bible Myths, P115 Ibid, P156 Ibid, P127 Francis Hitching, The Watt Atlas of Mysteries, Penn Books, London, 1981, P10, section entitled, Death of the Dinosaurs. 8. Ibid. 9. Ibid. 10. John Rhodes, The Reptoid Website, http://www.reptoids.com. 11. Dale Russell, Exponential Evolution, Implications for Intelligent Extraterrestrial Life, Advanced Space Research, 1983. 12. The Watt Atlas of Mysteries, P159 13. Ibid. 14. Herbert S. Zim and Robert H. Baker, Stars, A Golden Guide, Golden Press, New York, 1985, p58. 15. Graham Hancock, Quest for the Lost Civilization, Channel 4 Television, 1998. 16. Professor Philip Callahan, Ancient Mysteries and Modern Visions, Acres, Kansas City, USA, 1984. 17. See the John Rhodes website, http://www.reptoids.com. 18. John Rhodes, writing on his website. 19. William Bramley, Gods of Eden, Avon Books, New York. 20. Nexus Magazine, April-May 1994, pp 52-54. 21. Explorations in Grand Canyon, Arizona Gazette, April 5, 1909. 22. John Rhodes, The Human-Reptilian Connection, privately published and distributed paper in 1993. 23. Ibid. 24. Ibid. 25. Ibid. 26. Ibid. 27. Kathy O'Brien and Mark Phillips, Transformation of America, Reality Marketing Incorporated, Las Vegas, Nevada, USA, 1995. 28. Ibid, pp 165-166. 29. Ibid, p 165-30. Ibid, pp 209-210. 31. Ibid. 33. Hunter S. Thompson, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. 39. Foltz v. The 53. Chapter 3. The Babylonian Brotherhood. As the flood waters receded after the Phoenix cataclysm, the survivors came down from the mountains and up from within the earth. They settled on the lowlands and plains and began to rebuild. This was when Sumer, Egypt and the civilization in the Indus Valley suddenly appeared at a very high level of technological advancement, although they had existed before and were now restored after the upheavals. The Sumerian society began at the peak of its development because of this sudden infusion of knowledge, and the white Aryan race, originally from Mars, expanded out from the Caucasus Mountains and the Near East down into Sumer, Egypt and the Indus Valley where, as even conventional history agrees, highly advanced societies spontaneously emerged. However, within this white race, and others also, was a genetic stream I will call reptile Aryan or reptile human. Whenever I use the term Aryan, I am referring to the white race. These were the crossbreed bloodlines created from the genetic manipulation of the Anunnaki. The major center for the reptile Aryan bloodlines, in the ancient world after the flood waters receded, was Babylon in the south of the Sumer region alongside the river Euphrates. A closer look at the evidence appears to date the foundation of Babylon far earlier than previously believed, and it was one of the first cities of the post-flood era. It was here that the mystery schools and secret societies were formed, which were to span the globe in the thousands of years that followed. The Brotherhood which controls the world today is the modern expression of the Babylonian Brotherhood of reptile Aryan priests and royalty which came together there after the flood. It was in Babylon in this post-flood period from around 6,000 years ago that the foundation beliefs manipulated beliefs of today's world religions were established to control and rail the people. The founder of Babylon according to ancient texts and legend was Nimrod, who reigned with his wife, Queen Semiramis. Nimrod was described as a mighty tyrant and one of the giants. The Arabs believed that after the flood it was Nimrod who built or rebuilt the amazing structure at Baalbek in the Lebanon with its 3 stones weighing 800 tons each. It was said that he ruled the region that is now Lebanon and, according to Genesis, the first centers of Nimrod's kingdom were Babylon, Akkad and others in the land of Shinar, Sumer. Later he expanded further into Assyria to build cities like Nineveh where many of the Sumerian tablets were found. Nimrod and Semiramis, or the beings those names symbolized, were from the reptile bloodlines which also became known as Titans. The genetic streams of the reptile possessed humans and the full-blood reptilians. This race of giants or titans was said to have been descendants of Noah, the baby described in the Book of Enoch, previously the Book of Noah, as being a watcher-human hybrid with extremely white skin. The father of Nimrod in the text of Genesis was Cush, also known as Bel or Belus, who was the grandson of Noah and son of Ham. Cush became known as the deity, Hermes, which means son of Ham. One Ham or Chem means the burnt one and may have been connected to sun worship. A great network of deities emerged from Babylon, and its connections with Egypt. Nimrod and Semiramis have remained the key deities of the Brotherhood to this day under many different names and symbols. Nimrod was symbolized as a fish and Queen Semiramis as a fish and a dove. Semiramis is likely to be symbolic of Ninkarsag, the creator of the reptile-human crossbreeds. Nimrod was the fish god Dagon, who was depicted as half man, half fish. 3. It is possible that this was symbolic of him being half human, half-scaled reptile. Queen Semiramis was also symbolized as a fish because the Babylonians believed fish to be an aphrodisiac, and it became the symbol for the goddess of love. 4. Hence the use of the fish in Christian symbolism and architecture. In her role as the Holy Spirit, Semiramis was pictured as a dove holding an olive branch, and Semiramis means branch bearer, as in Z the Amir branch, and Amit, bearer. 5. Note also the symbolism of this in the story of Noah and the Great Flood, when the dove came back bearing an olive branch. The return of the reptilians after the flood. The name, Semiramis, was evolved from the earlier Indian deity, Sami Rama Isi or Semiramis. 6. A fish and a dove are 2 symbols still widely used in religious ritual and national ceremony, although most of the people involved have no idea of the true meaning. Sinn Féin, the political wing of the Northern Ireland terrorist group the IRA, has a dove as its symbol, and you find the dove on many of the sceptres held by the British monarch. See picture section. Both organizations are modem fronts for the Babylonian Brotherhood, and the doves symbolize Queen Semiramis. The dove to them is not a symbol of peace, but of death and destruction because of the reverse symbolism the Brotherhood employs. If it is positive to the masses, it is negative to the Brotherhood, and this allows their negative symbols to be placed throughout the public arena. No one complains because they have no idea what these symbols, like the dove, really represent. Semiramis was called the Queen of Heaven, also Rhea, the Virgin Mother of the Gods, and sometimes known as the Great Earth Mother, Ninkarsag. She was also worshipped under the name Astarte, the woman who made towers, and this could refer to the Tower of Babel, Babylon, which Nimrod is said to have built. The bloodlines of European royalty came from the reptilian bloodlines of Babylon, and the crown evolved from the horned headgear worn by Nimrod. The horns symbolized the monarch's authority and later became a metal headband with 3 horns symbolizing royal power with divine authority. 7. This is represented by the symbol of the fleur de fours, which you find throughout the regalia of modem royalty. See figure 6 overleaf. As I have mentioned already, the Draco royal hierarchy, the winged albino whites, are said to have horns, and I'm sure this is the true origin of the horned headgear of ancient royalty. The classic depiction of the devil also has Draco-like horns. Nimrod was given the title Baal, the Lord, and Semiramis was Baalta, my lady. The Latin term for my lady is Mea Domina, which in its corrupted Italian form became Madonna. 8. Nimrod was represented in a dual role of God the Father and Ninus, the son of Semiramis, and her olive branch was symbolic of this offspring produced through a virgin birth. Ninus was also known as Tammuz, who was said to have been crucified with a lamb at his feet and placed in a cave. When a rock was rolled away from the cave's entrance 3 days later, his body had disappeared. Heard that somewhere before. This husband-wife-son theme of Nimrod, Semiramis and Ninus Tammuz became the Osiris-Isis-Horus mythology of the Egyptians, with its equivalent in India, Asia, China and elsewhere. Much later it would be Joseph, Mary and Jesus. When the Babylonians held their spring rites to mark the death and resurrection after 3 days of Tammuz Ninus, they offered buns inscribed with a solar cross. Yes, even the hot cross buns of British Easter tradition come from Babylon. Easter comes from another face of Queen Semiramis Ishtar, and it is from this, and possibly another brotherhood deity, Ashtaroth, that we get the name of Ashtras and Ashtar Command, a completely manipulated New Age belief in an extraterrestrial hero who has come to save us. The Babylonian myths and symbolism provided the foundations for all the major religions, especially Christianity. The Roman Church was the creation of the Babylonian Brotherhood, and the Pope still wears a mitre shaped like a fish head to symbolize Nimrod. This is also the significance of his fisherman's ring. The chair of St. Peter in the Vatican was claimed to be a holy relic, but in 1968 it was exposed by a scientific commission as being no older than the 9th century. More significantly, according to the Catholic Encyclopedia, is that it is decorated by 12 plates portraying the 12 labors of Hercules. This same work claims that Hercules was another name for Nimrod before becoming a deity of the Greeks. 9 In 1825, Pope Leo XII authorized the production of a Jubilee medal, and it depicted a woman in a pose that was blatant symbolism of Queen Semiramis. She had a crucifix in her left hand, a cup in her right, and on her head was a 7-rayed crown like the one on the Statue of Liberty, another depiction of Semiramis which was given to New York by French Freemasons. A contact who has relatives working in high positions in the Vatican told me how, during the reign of Pope John Paul II, he was given a guided tour of the place which blew his mind. He was shown the Pope's solid gold bath which is decorated with all the astrological symbols, and he saw inside the vacuum-sealed vaults which contain thousands of ancient esoteric books which have been stolen and hoarded over hundreds of years of religious dictatorship and so taken out of public circulation. The Roman Church and the Babylonian Brotherhood are one and the same. Nimrod was also Enos, the god with 2 faces, who was later known to the Romans as Janus. One of the Anunnaki brothers, Enki the serpent god, was also figure 6, the fleur-de-lis, symbol of the Babylonian trinity of Nimrod, Queen Semiramis and Tammuz, among other things. Known as Ea. The Freemasonic eagle with 2 heads looking left and right, east and west, is symbolic of Nimrod in the role of Enos, and I would suggest that the eagle is symbolic of the winged Draco. Enos, it was said, held the keys to the doors of heaven, and he was the sole intermediary between God and humanity, therefore any belief not supported by him was false and should be condemned. This was a wonderful tool for the Babylonian priesthood to impose their will on the populace, and exactly the same scam has been played by their successors, the Christian priests, the rabbis and the priesthoods of Islam, Hinduism and all the rest. The Roman Catholic title of cardinal comes from the word cardo meaning hinge and relates to Nimrod's role as guardian of the door to heaven. 10 The Babylonian priests even established a governing body they called the Grand Council of Pontiffs, a name later transferred to the Church of Rome. 11 The Babylonian high priest, who instructed the inner circle initiates, was known as Peter, meaning the great interpreter. The feast day of the Christian Saint Peter was traditionally celebrated on the day the sun entered the astrological house of Aquarius, the very day that Enos and Janus were honored. 12 The Babylonian religion, like all the look-alikes that were to follow, consisted of 2 levels. The masses were manipulated into believing superstitions and into taking symbolic stories literally, while the chosen initiates were given the real knowledge on penalty of death if they ever revealed it. In this way the truth about life, human potential, history and the reptilian agenda were lost to the population and kept only for the few. Human sacrifice was fundamental to the religion of Babylon, and wherever the Babylonian Brotherhood and their reptilian bloodlines have traveled, human sacrifice has always gone with them because the reptilians demand these rituals. The malevolent ones seem to be addicted to blood, and this has been passed on to their crossbreeds, as the evidence I shall present will show. The Babylonian priests were required to eat some of their sacrificial offerings, and so the word for priest, cannibal, became the term for eating human flesh, cannibal. 13 Moloch, the name of that flying lizard I mentioned earlier, was another name for Nimrod. Tammuz. Tam means to perfect and Muz means to burn. You can see the symbolism of Tammuz Moloch, therefore, in the rituals of burning children alive in honor of this deity which, staggeringly, still go on today. The Beltane ritual, later performed in Britain by the Druids on May 1st, May Day, involved the burning of children in the belly of a huge wicker effigy of a man. This was inherited from the Babylonians when the Brotherhood expanded across Europe. Indeed, it may well be that the reptilians had once based themselves in what is now the United Kingdom and Ireland before they moved their main focus to the Near East and Africa. The Feast of Tammuz was on June 23 and celebrated his ascension from the underworld. When he was resurrected, Tammuz was known as Ons, the fish god, and Ons is a version of the name John. 14. For this reason, John has been used as a symbol for Tammuz Nimrod in symbolic characters like John the Baptist. June 23, the Feast of Tammuz, became the Christian day called St. John's Eve. The Nimrod-Semiramis combination has been depicted under countless names in the civilizations and cultures which have followed. These deities throughout the world may seem to be an unfathomable tidal wave of names, but they are overwhelmingly different names for the same two figures. Another deity widely used in Satanism for the sacrifice of children today is Kronos, the king of the Cyclops in Greek legend. He was known as the Tower Builder and is almost certainly another version of Nimrod, the builder of the biblical Tower of Babel. 15. The reason the reptile bloodlines are involved in such unspeakable ritual and practice today is quite simply because they always have been. When you follow these bloodlines across history, you find they use the same rituals and sacrifice to the same deities, right to the present day. Another passage in the book of Enoch tells of the Watchers breeding with human women and the behavior of the offspring they produced, and they became pregnant, and they bore great giants, who consumed all the acquisitions of men. And when men could no longer sustain them, the giants turned against them and devoured mankind. And they began to sin against birds and beasts, and reptiles, and fish, and to devour one another's flesh and drink blood. The earth laid accusation against the lawless 1:16. That passage describes the bloodlines I am highlighting, and they came together in the Babylonian Brotherhood, which has since expanded across the planet. While we look out of our eyes and feel part of this physical world, the reptiles look into this third dimension, much like someone looking through a window. In this case, the eyes of the physical body. We are consciously in the third dimension, they are consciously in the fourth, looking into the third. When you know what you are looking for, it is the eyes that give them away. They are dark, piercing and cold. The reptile full-bloods are not attached to their bodies like humans. They are knowingly using them as spacesuits to operate in this world, and when one wears out they simply occupy another. It is from this process of possession by the reptilians and other low-vibrational entities that we have the ancient tales, indeed modern ones too, of demons, devils and evil spirits taking over a human mind and body. It is the reptilians and other consciousness of the lower fourth dimension, the cesspit vibration as I call it, which are summoned during satanic, black magic rituals, and it is during these rituals that many unsuspecting puppets are plugged into the reptilian consciousness and taken over. So it was in Babylon and so it is today. As I revealed in I Am Me I Am Free, and will elaborate upon in this book, the Brotherhood hierarchy today are seriously into satanic ritual, child sacrifice, blood drinking and other abominations that would take your breath away. Yes, I am talking about some of the biggest royal, political, business, banking and media names on the planet. People like Henry Kissinger, George Bush, the British royal family and many other presidents, prime ministers and members of royalty. Fantastic. Of course it is, but since when did the truth not sound fantastic in a world of such denial and illusion? 3 of the principal elements of the Babylonian religion were fire, serpents and the sun. I should explain their focus on the sun because it is a vital part of the story. Most of the global population worshipped the sun for its obvious gifts of heat and light and the effect this had on their crops and well-being. However, within the hierarchy of the Babylon Brotherhood and other elite groups which had the advanced knowledge, they focused on the sun for other reasons too. They understood the true nature of the sun as a multidimensional consciousness which extends across the solar system on unseen frequency levels. Even in this physical dimension, the sun's emissions of magnetic energy are constantly affecting us second by second. The sun has a diameter of some 864,000 miles and contains 99% of the matter in the solar system. 17. It is an immense ball of energy which works very much like an atomic bomb, and the internal temperature can reach as much as 14 million degrees centigrade. 18. It rotates faster at the equator than at the poles, and therefore the activity and stimulation of the sun's magnetic field is simply colossal. The writer and researcher Maurice Cotterell has made a long and detailed study of sunspot and solar flare activity when the sun is projecting immensely powerful magnetic energy. This has been photographed as gigantic loops of fire, some 100,000 miles high. 19. This energy travels to the Earth on the solar wind, and it can affect computer systems and cause power blackouts. But for the Van Allen belts, the zones of radiation which surround the planet and connect with the Earth's magnetic field, the sun's energy would fry us. Maurice Cotterell studied the sunspot cycles and established short, long and great cycles of solar activity, as he explains in his book with Adrian G. Gilbert called The Mayan Prophecies. 20 When Codrell's research was already advanced, he came across the amazing mathematical system of numbers and symbols left by the ancient Maya people in Central America. The Maya claimed to have originated with the gods and recognized a lost island as their former home. Their astonishingly accurate mathematical and astronomical systems and their measurement of time were inherited from much older cultures and ultimately from the extraterrestrials. We have already seen that Mexican President Miguel de la Madrid claimed that the Mayans were interbred with the reptilians, the iguana race as he put it. Maurice Cotterell was fascinated to realize that the Mayan cycles of human evolution corresponded remarkably with his sunspot cycles of magnetic emissions. Even over thousands of years, they were incredibly close. This is perfectly explainable. Everything is energy. Life is the interaction of magnetic vibrational fields. Change the magnetism and you change the nature of the energy field. Change the energy field and you change the nature of mental, emotional, spiritual and physical life, all of which are energy in different forms. The other planets do this as they circle the sun and affect the magnetic field of the Earth. We call this astrology. Cotterell believes that we are affected by these fields most powerfully at the time we are conceived rather than the time we are born, a point which has much validity. I feel that both powerfully affect us. His research established that sunspot activity corresponds with the human fertility cycles and with the emergence and demise of great civilizations and empires. Scientists have also discovered that humans have an internal clock which is in sync with the sun. In short, the sun's effect on human life is fundamental and far beyond its obvious contribution of warmth and light. The extraterrestrials knew this in these ancient times, and the sun was viewed with awe. It is the physical and spiritual heart of the solar system, and it came to symbolize the Creator, particularly the male aspects of the creative force. He who is the light of the world. This knowledge of the sun will be a common theme throughout the rest of this book as we journey through history to the present day. It does, however, make the decoding of history a little more complex because the ancients would constantly use sun and astrological symbolism in their stories, and some of the names for their gods would be used to symbolize the sun and the planets. Working out what is literal and what is symbolic is a considerable challenge. I also think that the term sun god has been used to symbolize the extraterrestrials and their crossbreeds, who were said in the ancient texts to have faces which shone like the sun, the shining ones. Imagine the power you would have to advance an agenda and manipulate the human race if you knew the cycles of energy from the sun and other planets and how they were likely to affect human consciousness. You would know when people would be more prone to anger, aggression, fear, doubt and guilt, and therefore when to have your wars, economic collapses and so on. The Brotherhood have always had this knowledge and they use it to great effect today, as I shall document. The Babylonian Brotherhood and its reptilian bloodlines expanded across the Middle and Near East, especially to Egypt, and eventually into Europe and the Americas. Icke, the early Egyptian civilization after the Venus upheavals, was the work of the Aryans from Mars, the Phoenicians, with or without the reptilian Anunnaki. But before 2000 BC the reptilians were taking over. The Royal Court of the Dragon was founded by the priests of Mendes in around 2200 BC, and this still exists today as the Imperial and Royal Court of the Dragon Sovereignty. The author, Lawrence Gardner, is the present Chancellor of the Imperial Court of Dragon Sovereignty, and his postal address in Devon, England is at Columba House. Columba equals Dove equals Queen Semiramis. According to Gardner, the name Dracula means son of Dracul and was inspired by Prince Vlad III of Transylvania, a chancellor of the Court of the Dragon in the 15th century. The prince's father was called Dracul within the court. Dracul equals Draco. Wherever they went, the Babylonian Brotherhood created their own mystery schools to manipulate the population into believing a nonsense and into giving away their power through superstition and fear. At the same time, the higher levels of these pyramid structures communicated the advanced knowledge to those who had served the reptilian agenda. Where other non-reptilian initiation schools existed, they were infiltrated and taken over by the Babylonian priesthood. Mystery schools have been around for tens of thousands of years, probably hundreds of thousands, and they are used to pass on advanced knowledge to those the hierarchy and priests decide are worthy enough. In his book, The Masters of Wisdom, J.G. Bennett writes of how the Russian mystic, Grigory Gurdjieff, told him that the mystery schools went back at least 30,000 to 40,000 years. 21 Gurdjieff said he had learned this from cave drawings in the Caucasus Mountains and Turkestan, that area again. I often hear New Age people scream with indignation at the thought that the ancient mystery schools were part of the manipulation. Well, first of all, there should be no structures, whatever their intent, that deny knowledge to people. I don't care what their intent may be, once you consider it your right to deny knowledge and decide who should and should not have access to it, you are playing a very dangerous and arrogant game. There were those of positive intent who wanted to use the mystery schools to give the knowledge to people they believed would use it wisely, and I am not suggesting that all these schools were malevolent, certainly not. But even the positive ones were eventually infiltrated by the servants of the reptilians. As Manly P. Hall, the Freemasonic historian, wrote, while the elaborate ceremonial magic of antiquity was not necessarily evil, there arose from its perversion several false schools of sorcery, or black magic, in Egypt. The black magicians of Atlantis continued to exercise their superhuman powers until they had completely undermined and corrupted the morals of the primitive mysteries. They usurped the position formerly occupied by the initiates and seized the reins of spiritual government. Thus black magic dictated the state religion and paralyzed the intellectual and spiritual activities of the individual by demanding his complete and unhesitating acquiescence in the dogma formulated by the priestcraft. The pharaoh became a puppet in the hands of the Scarlet Council, a committee of arch-sorcerers elevated to power by the priesthood. 22 The black magicians that Hall says were formerly in Atlantis were, for me, the reptilian-human hybrids of what I call the Babylonian Brotherhood. It is their secret society network that now spans the globe and operates in literally every country. It allows the coordination of the agenda across national borders and between apparently unconnected companies and institutions like politics, banking, business, the military, and the media. Knowledge is not good nor bad, it just is. It is how we use that knowledge that is positive or negative. At the upper levels of this network, they know of the true power of the sun, magnetics, and the mind, the effect of the planets on human behavior, how to manipulate time, consciousness, energy, the weather, and so much more. If used malevolently, this knowledge can be incredibly destructive and manipulating, and this is what has happened. At the same time, the reptilians have used their secret societies to create institutions in the public arena such as religions and political parties to suck this advanced knowledge out of circulation. The Inquisition was a wonderful example of this technique. Merely to speak about esoteric matters was to sign your own death warrant. This scam has been so effective that still today you have Christians condemning esoteric information as the devil when the same knowledge is the very foundation of their religion. If you want to know where Christianity really came from, stick around. It is recycled paganism, and provably so. Yet Christianity has been used quite brilliantly as the major vehicle for removing vital knowledge from the public domain. Whenever Christianity and other religions took control of a country or region, the ancient texts and records were removed or destroyed. This took out of circulation the very knowledge the reptilians have used. Of the gods, Caucasus Mountains mountain region of safety during Great Flood / Iona / Irtiche Sumer Tin Phoenicians have RFCWS / Elovit les Lapa _Q Jerusalem Egyptians / Busik Zitan R. Euphrates. The Aryan race C. Sumer ant expanded to Egypt after the flood waters receded. The reptile Aryans were based largely in F5 Ari Khan Figure 7, the land of the gods in the ancient world from where the Aryan and Repti-Aryan bloodstreams emerged in the Caucasus Mountains, Sumer, Babylon, and Egypt. There were other advanced peoples in other parts of the world, however, not only here. And still used to manipulate an ignorant population. It was also in the name of Christianity that most of the accounts of the true history of humankind have been destroyed, along with knowledge of the influence on human affairs of extraterrestrial races, positive and negative. This allowed an alternative invented history to be written which has delinked humanity from its origins. Controlling history is so important because if you manipulate how people see what we call the past, you will influence massively how they see the present. The themes I have highlighted so far, along with the deities and symbols, will travel with us from here to the present day as we follow the expansion of the Babylonian Brotherhood across the world. Invariably, the Babylon reptilian full-bloods and hybrids manipulated themselves into the positions of power and influence in the countries where they settled. They had a much higher level of knowledge than most of the people, and, as vehicles for the fourth-dimensional reptilians, there was already a long-term plan to work to, the Great Work of Ages as it became known to the Freemasons. They allowed the non-reptilian population to do the work, and then, when new societies were established, the Brotherhood priests and initiates would hijack the positions of religious and political power and ensure that any advanced knowledge in circulation was sucked out of the public domain and into their mystery schools and secret societies. The white race and the Repti-Aryan crossbreeds had emerged from the Caucasus Mountains and the mountains of Iran and Kurdistan after the flood to settle in Egypt, Israel/Palestine, and what we now call Jordan, Syria, Iraq, Iran, and Turkey, going up to the Caucasus Mountains, see Figure 7. Significantly, it was from this same region that all the world's major religions emerged, and this is no accident. In earlier times, the civilizations of Sumer, Babylon and Assyria were in the general area of what we call Iraq, while Turkey was previously known as Asia Minor and Persia. Richard Lawrence, the Archbishop of Cashel, who translated the first English edition of the Book of Enoch from the Ethiopian, established from the descriptions of the longest day of the year that the author of the text had to have lived in the Caucasus region and not Palestine, as most people believed. 23. This was where the main reptile-human bloodlines emerged from. In the original text of the Book of Enoch was the much older Book of Noah, the reptilian crossbreed. The Aryan race as it expanded into new territory was known under various names, the most significant of which were the Hittites and Phoenicians. I think there were definitely other Aryan settlements outside this region, possibly Britain among them, and certainly the reptilians were operating in other parts of the world, like the Americas. But this mountainous region around the Caucasus and down to the plains of Sumer and Egypt is a key to the true history of humankind over the last 7,000 years. The Caucasus Mountains came up again and again in my research, and how appropriate that in North America white people are known as Caucasian. Even according to official history, it was a white Aryan race from the Caucasus Mountains region which moved into the Indus Valley of India about 1550 BC and created what is today known as the Hindu religion. It was this same Aryan race, they called themselves Arya, which introduced the ancient Sanskrit language to India and the stories and myths contained in the Hindu holy books, the Vedas. L.A. Waddell, in his outstanding research into this Aryan race, established that the father of the first historical Aryan king of India, recorded in the Mahabharata epic and Indian Buddhist history, was the last historical king of the Hittites in Asia Minor. 24. The Indian Aryans worshipped the sun as the father god Indra, and the Hittite Phoenicians called their father god Bel by the name Indara. 25. Under many names, the same Aryan people also settled in Sumer, Babylon, Egypt and Asia Minor, now Turkey and other Near Eastern countries, taking with them the same stories, myths, and religion. This is why, as we shall see in detail later, all the major religions tell the same tale but using different names. They all come from the same source, this Aryan race, which seems to have originated on Mars, and the reptile-human bloodlines operating covertly within them. What we call the Jewish race also originated in the Caucasus region and not, as claimed, in Israel. Jewish historical and anthropological sources have shown that only a few of the people known as Jewish have any genetic connection to Israel. In the 8th century, a people called the Khazars living in the Caucasus Mountains and southern Russia had a mass conversion to the Jewish religion. Later, when that empire folded, these same people made their way north over a long period of time to settle in other parts of Russia, Lithuania and Estonia. From there they entered Western Europe and eventually the United States. The Rothschild family is one of these bloodlines. These are the same people who justified the takeover of Arab Palestine after the last war by saying that God had given them an ancient right to that land as his chosen people. In truth, Figure 8, the Aryans and the reptile Aryans expanded by sea and land into Europe under many names, and especially thanks to the British Empire, they would eventually take over the WAD. Their original homeland is the Caucasus region and southern Russia, not Israel. See. And the truth shall set you free for a detailed and sourced account of this story and the secret society manipulation that was behind the creation of Israel, or Rothschildland as it really is. The white race expanded northwards into Europe. The first people went by sea under the name, the Phoenicians, and over many centuries others migrated over land, see figure 8. Two of the latter groups were called the Cimmerians and the Scythians, and through a series of name changes these same bloodlines populated Europe and reconnected with the earlier Aryan settlers of Britain and northern Europe who had been installed by the seafaring Phoenicians. The Phoenicians are crucial to the story and I will come to them in detail in a moment. The Cimmerians migrated northwest from the Caucasus and Asia Minor, Turkey into the countries we now call Belgium, the Netherlands, Germany and Denmark. The Roman historians, Pliny and Tacitus, said that all the people along the coast from the Netherlands to Denmark were the same ethnic group, and this is supported by archaeological evidence which indicates that this people arrived in that region about 300 to 250 BC. Another group of Cimmerians traveled up the river Danube through Hungary and Austria into southern Germany and France. The Romans called them Gauls and the Greeks knew them as the Keltoi or Celts. Groups of these Celtic tribes also settled in Bohemia and Bavaria, and others invaded northern Italy. Sallust, the Roman historian, records how Romans were defeated a number of times by the Cimbri, who he says were Gauls. Other Roman historians say the Cimbri were Celts. They were divided into 3 tribes, the Belgae, northeast France, the Gauls, central France, and the Aquitani, southern France to the Pyrenees Mountains. By the 2nd century BC, the Gauls and Celts, the White Cimmerians from the Caucasus Mountains and the Middle East, occupied all of Central Europe and northern Italy, and they went on to conquer the whole of that country. Around 280 BC they swept down into Asia Minor and reoccupied the lands of their ancestors. As the historian Professor Henry Rawlinson said, these 2 great invasions into Asia Minor proceeded from the same identical race, in the first instance called the Cimmerians and in the second, the Gauls. 26 These invading Gauls based themselves in a place called Phrygia, which became known as Galatia, Galatia, and it was to these people that St. Paul was supposed to have written in the New Testament's letter to the Galatians. The Cimmerians or Cimbri also settled in Wales, and to this day the name for that country in the Welsh language is Cymru. The Scythians, another Aryan group, also moved north from the Caucasus into Europe, where their name was changed by the Romans to distinguish between them and other peoples. The sacred emblems of the Scythians included the serpent, the ox, Nimrod/Taurus, fire, the sun, knowledge, and Thor, Theo, the god the Egyptians called Pan. The Romans called the Scythians the Sarmati and the Germani from the Latin word Germanus, meaning genuine. The Scythians were known, therefore, as the genuine people, and of course from Germany we get German and Germany. The name change is confirmed by the writings of the Roman historians Pliny and Strabo. The Anglo-Saxons who invaded Britain were also known as Germany by the Romans. The land called Old Saxony is modern-day North Germany and the Netherlands. Both the Angles and the Saxons came from the same genetic source, the White Cimmerians and Scythians from the Caucasus and the Middle Near East. It is the same with William the Conqueror and his Normans, the last people to invade Britain in 1066 at the Battle of Hastings. The terms Norman and Normandy originate from the Norse, north, men, because they came from Scandinavia to occupy that region of France. The story of the Scandinavian hero Odin says that he came from Iceland or Assam, which just happens to be the lands of Scythia and can be identified in Aryan India. From there about 200 to 300 AD, it is said, Odin led a huge army north to conquer Sweden. His army was called the Sphere, and in Swedish that country is still called Sveriga, the land of the sphere. Another group of Scythians, who became known as the Sakas, went east from the Caucasus following the trail of the earlier Aryans, and they reached the borders of China by 175 BC. About this time Chinese records tell of a people called the Sai Wang or Sok Wang who were forced to flee India. Sok Wang means Saka princes. The records indicate that these Saka retreated south into India through the mountain passes from Afghanistan, and coins dating from about 100 BC confirm that a Saka kingdom was created in the upper Indus valleys between Kashmir and Afghanistan. Again, it is not a coincidence that the religion of Buddhism emerged from lands occupied by the Saka, Aryan Scythians. At least by 500 BC a tribe called the Sakyas lived in the area where Buddha is supposed to have been born around 63 years earlier. Gautama, Lord Buddha, was called Sakyashana, Sakyamuni, the Sakya sage, Sakya the teacher and the lion of the tribe of Sakya. All this will become highly significant when we look at the single origin of all the major and most minor religions and their heroes. The Scythia and Asaka and the Cimmerian/Cimbri were in fact all the same people, and this is confirmed by inscriptions scored into the Behistun rock in the Zagros Mountains on an old caravan trail from Babylon. The inscriptions were ordered by Darius the Great about 515 BC, and they were written in 3 languages, Babylonian, Elamite and Persian. Whenever the Elamite and Persian versions say Saka, the Persians Babylonians use the term Cimmeri. So these white Aryan peoples under different names with their same religion and religious heroes under different names expanded from their origins in the Caucasus and the Middle and Near East and went overland into Europe, India and as far as China. And within them were the reptile human bloodlines who battled for, and eventually won, supremacy to control the course of events as the kings, queens, priests and military leaders under the collective title I dubbed the Babylonian Brotherhood. That the Babylonians were part of the Aryan race is confirmed by ancient inscriptions and titles. The Cassi or Cassi was a title first used by the Phoenicians about 3000 BC, and this was adopted by the Babylonians who ruled the Mesopotamian Empire. Cassi also appears as a personal name of Phoenicians in Egypt, and Cassi was the inspiration for the ruling kings known as Catti in pre-Roman Britain, one of whom minted Cas coins featuring the sun horse and other solar symbols. 27 This Aryan expansion began as far back as 3000 BC, probably earlier, with their seafaring branch, the Phoenicians. They were a technologically advanced people who have been marginalized by official history, and this has obscured their true identity. They are fundamental to understanding where we have come from and where we are now. It was they who brought both their genetic lines and their knowledge to Europe, Scandinavia and the Americas, thousands of years BC. Their story is told by L. A. Waddell in his book, The Phoenician Origin of Britons, Scots and Anglo-Saxons. Waddell was a fellow of the Royal Anthropological Institute and spent a lifetime researching the evidence. He shows that the Phoenicians were not a Semitic race as previously believed, but a white Aryan race. Examination of Phoenician tombs reveals that they were a long-headed Aryan race and of a totally different racial type to the Semites. The Phoenicians of the ancient world traveled by sea from their bases in Asia Minor, Syria and Egypt to settle in the islands of the Mediterranean like Crete and Cyprus and also Greece and Italy. It was the Phoenicians who carried the knowledge which later emerged as the civilizations of Minoan Crete, classic Greece and Roman Italy. They were also the brains behind much of the Egyptian culture in this period, before it was hijacked by the reptilians. The Egyptians knew the Phoenicians as the Penag, Panassa and Fenka. The Greeks called them the Phoenikas, and to the Romans they were the Phoenicians. 28 There is a simple reason why the Egyptians depicted many of their gods with white skin and blue eyes in exactly the same way as other cultures all over the world did. This advanced race, called the Phoenicians, were white-skinned and often had blue eyes, the same as the reptilian human crossbreeds and the same, it would appear, as the race from Mars. Thus we have the Scandinavian races, which were installed by the Phoenicians and other peoples of the same bloodstock and general location. It is also the origin of the Aryan master race nonsense which obsessed the Nazis and the secret societies which created them. The hero of the Freemason secret society to this day is the mythical Hiram Abief, the so-called builder of King Solomon's temple. Abief is supposed to have been a Phoenician. The grandfather of the famous Egyptian pharaoh Akhenaton, the father of Tutankhamun, was a Phoenician high priest. The phoenix, the mythical bird of Egypt, was in fact the sunbird of the Phoenicians, the emblem of the sun god, Vil or Bel, and as it has been later symbolized, a peacock or an eagle. 29 Evidence has emerged in recent years about pyramids on Mars, when the NASA scientists, Vincent DiPietro and Gregory Molinar, discovered 6 enormous pyramids like those in Egypt in the Sidona region of Mars. 30 It would make sense that the same Martian race with the same knowledge would also build pyramids when they came to Earth, and the same can be said of the Anunnaki if, as Zechariah Sitchin speculates and I agree, they had settlements on Mars. The Phoenicians were not confined to the Mediterranean and the Middle East. They landed in Britain around 3000 BC and unmistakable Phoenician artifacts have been found in Brazil, as well as possible Egyptian remains in the Grand Canyon in America. The Phoenicians landed in the Americas thousands of years before the manufactured photo opportunity better known as the journey of Christopher Columbus. The reason that the native legends of the Americas speak of tall white gods coming from the sea bringing advanced knowledge is because that is precisely what happened, if you forget. The gods bit. They were the Aryan race and the reptile Aryans from the east landing in the Americas thousands of years ago, the same Aryan race or gods who the Sumerians said gifted them their civilization after the flood. This is also why the later white invaders who followed Columbus were astonished to find that the native peoples of the American continent had the same basic religious stories and myths as they had. This is perfectly explainable now. They came from the same source, the Aryan race known as the Phoenicians, among many other names like Sumerian and Hittite, with the reptile Aryan bloodlines within them. There also seems to have been a direct reptilian invasion in the Americas way back. The evidence of an advanced race who knew the Americas existed comes with centuries-old maps like the Haji Ahmed Portolan map, compiled in 1519, which depicts the North American continent with a wide causeway connecting Alaska and Siberia. There is also an accurate drawing of an ice-free Antarctica. The arrival of the Aryan Phoenicians in Britain also corresponds with the building of the great stone circles and observatories like Stonehenge and Avebury in Wiltshire, although some researchers say they were built much earlier. The advanced Phoenician Sumerians, who had a highly developed knowledge of astronomy, astrology, sacred geometry, mathematics and the Earth's magnetic force line network known as the global energy grid, had all the knowledge necessary to build these great structures. L. A. Waddell said that he found Sumerian markings on one of the stones at Stonehenge. 31 Professor Alexander Thom, Emeritus Professor of Engineering Science at Oxford University from 1945 to 1961, discovered that the ancients who built Stonehenge knew about Pythagorean geometric and mathematical principles thousands of years before Pythagoras was born. Thom explained in his 1967 book, Megalithic Sites in Britain, that the stones not only formed geometric patterns in and around the circle, they also aligned to features in the surrounding landscape and to the positions of the sun, moon and prominent stars at particular times, particularly where the sun appeared or disappeared at the equinox or solstice and where the moon was at the extreme positions of its cycle. It was a gigantic astronomical clock, he said. But it is more than that. It is a receiver and transmitter of energy. The Earth's magnetic grid, or grids, consist of lines of magnetic energy known as ley lines, meridians or dragon lines to the Chinese. Where these lines cross, the energy spirals into a vortex, and where many lines cross you have a massive vortex of energy. These are the power places, the sacred sites of the ancients who knew of this system. The vortex, or spiral, is a constant throughout the universe. Our galaxy is a spiral, water spirals downwards, hair grows in a spiral at the crown, the DNA molecule which carries our genetic blueprint is a double spiral. Brian Desborough, my scientist friend from California, told me there is a point on one of the Earth grids, the Hartmann grid as it is called, where 12 of these force lines meet and go down into the Earth. Where was that? I asked. A place called Avebury in England, he said. The very place the advanced Phoenician Sumerians chose to build their stone circles at least 5,000 years ago, along with a series of surrounding sites, including Silbury Hill, the biggest human-made mound in Europe, and others like West Kennet Long Barrow. These form a sort of circuit board at the heart of the energy grid which fundamentally affects the nature of the Earth's magnetic field. I lived near Avebury for 2 years and it is an incredibly powerful place if you are sensitive to energy. It is also the area where most of the crop circles, or more accurately, crop formations, have appeared, particularly the most complex of them. Even more interesting is the apparent connection between Avebury and Mars. The best-known researcher of the apparently man-made structure called the face on Mars and an area of that planet known as Sidna, is the American Richard C. Hoagland. He has been a science journalist, a director of planetariums in West Hartford and New York, and an advisor at the NASA Goddard Space Flight Center. Hoagland produces evidence in his book, Monuments on Mars 32, that the alleged face and the pyramids are part of a vast area built to align with the sunrise on the Martian summer solstice 500,000 years ago minus 50,000 years before the estimated arrival on Earth of the Anunnaki. I have little doubt that the same race that built the structures in Sidna, including pyramids, also built Stonehenge and Avebury. There is evidence, in fact, that Avebury could be a mirror image of the complex at Sidna. When you take same-scale topographical maps of both places and superimpose one on the other, the correlation of objects and the distances between. Figure 9, Leonardo da Vinci's depiction of man according to the sacred geometry known as the Golden Mean. Them is incredibly similar, as members of Hoagland's team established. He also discovered that this Mars city was built according to the same laws used to create other similar complexes on the Earth. The same mathematics, alignments and sacred geometry can be found in Sidna on Mars and in the great structures of the ancient world like those at Stonehenge, the pyramids at Giza in Egypt, Teotihuacan in Mexico, and in Zimbabwe. These mathematics accord with the golden mean geometry as depicted by the Italian artist, Leonardo da Vinci, 1452–1519, in his picture of the man inside a circle, see figure 9. Da Vinci, as we shall see, was a leading initiate of the secret society network, and this is how he was able to predict the coming of the telephone, design flying machines and tanks, and design bicycles in the 15th and 16th centuries which look basically like the modern version today. Another constant is the latitude of 19.5 degrees. This is the latitude on which the pyramids, many ancient temple complexes, and other sacred structures were built. It is also where you will find the volcanoes on Hawaii, the shield volcanoes on Venus, the massive Olympus Mons volcano on Mars, the dark spot on Neptune, the red spot on Jupiter, and the main area of sunspot activity, north and south, on the Sun. 33 This all fits like a glove, because sunspots are emissions of incredibly powerful electromagnetic energy from the Sun, and volcanoes are obvious emissions of energy from the planets. Not surprisingly, therefore, 19.5 degrees is the point of energy exchange between rotating spheres, and the hierarchy of the ancients knew this. The Sumerians knew, for instance, about the cycle of what is called precession. This is the effect of the Earth's wobble which slowly moves the planet on its axis so that it faces different star systems or astrological houses over many thousands of years. As their records show, the Sumerians knew that it took 2,160 years for the Earth to move through each house and 25,920 years to complete the cycle, the period it also takes the solar system to complete its journey around its galactic center. We are completing one of these cycles now, hence the enormous change that is upon us. Ancient temples all over the world reflect these cycles of precession in their geometry and mathematics. Isn't it amazing what primitive people can do? The elite of the Phoenician Aryans had enormous knowledge of the Earth's energy grid and its potential to affect human consciousness. After all, we live within the planet's magnetic field. When it changes, we change. If you live in water and the water changes, you are fundamentally affected, and it is the same with the energy ocean that we occupy. Thus you have the movement of the planets affecting the Earth's magnetic field and through that affecting us. The Brotherhood don't want us to know any of this, and so they have used their religions, like Christianity, to condemn astrology as the work of the devil and their science to dismiss it as mumbo-jumbo. The mystery stone circles and structures are much less mysterious when you seek answers with open-minded research. The evidence strongly suggests that they were built by the Phoenician Aryans who came here from the Middle and Near East. It is the same with the mystery white horses scored into the chalk hillsides of Britain. Just before I wrote this chapter, I visited the oldest white horse in Britain, the famous one at Uffington in Wiltshire, not far from Avebury, see picture section. The plaque said that its date of construction was about 3000 BC, exactly the period when the Phoenicians arrived in the British Isles. Why should the Phoenicians score white horses into the hillsides of Britain? Again, the answer is simple. Their religion was focused on the sun, and the white horse was a Phoenician symbol for the sun. The great stone circles and structures throughout Britain, like Stonehenge and Avebury, were built with the knowledge held by the ruling and priestly classes of the Phoenicians and the Babylonian Brotherhood, which infiltrated and eventually controlled the Aryan leadership. This knowledge included the ability to use sound and other techniques to throw a magnetic field around a massive stone and delink it from the laws of gravity. It then becomes weightless. This period of around 3000 BC is very significant. While the Phoenicians were at work in this period in Britain and elsewhere, the pyramids at Giza in Egypt have also been dated to around 3000 BC using the latest carbon dating methods. Traces of charcoal found within the mortar apparently made this possible. 34. The Aryans of the Near and Middle East had many names: the Hittites, the Phoenicians, the Goths, and so on. You can follow words and names through these apparently different cultures to show that they came from the same source. Some of the stone circles are sometimes called hair stones, which, according to L.A. Waddell's research, evolved through Hari or Haria, the title for the ruling Goths, and from the Hittite title of Hari, Arai or Aryan. Hair stones are Aryan stones. Just as Han Krishna means Aryan Krishna, very appropriate given that the Hindu religion was the work of the Aryans. You also have Castlerig stone circle near Keswick in Cumberland. The word rig was a title for Gothic kings and princes, and the Gothic came from the Aryans. Ancient depictions of Aryan kings in Cilicia have them wearing the Gothic style of dress. The name of Keswick itself means abode of the Kes, the Kassi or Kadi clan of the Hittites, and the county of between St. George and the Dragon could well have been symbolic of the Martian reptilian conflicts which seem to go back a very long way. The Red Cross of St. George, England, and the crosses of St. Andrew, Scotland, and St. Patrick, Ireland, and the ensigns of Scandinavia were all carried as sacred standards of victory by the Phoenicians. The Red Cross was the fire cross, a Phoenician Aryan symbol for the sun, as was the swastika, later used by the Nazis. A swastika can be seen on a stone dedicated to the Phoenician sun god Bel, which was found at Craignairgad in Scotland and was used to decorate the robes of their high priestesses, see figures 10 and 11. I read that the name swastika comes from figure 10, swastika, the Phoenician sun symbol, on the Phoenician Craignairgad stone in Scotland, and figure 11, on the robe of a Phoenician high priestess. Cumberland has evolved through names like Cymru and Cumbers from its origin, Sumer. The term Aryan comes from a Phoenician word, arai, meaning noble one. Thus we get the name Sumerian and aristocracy or Aryan stock racy. The lion has always been a major symbol through the ages because it was an Aryan symbol for the sun and was often placed at the entrances to temples and sacred places. Hence the lion-bodied sphinx, which also relates to the astrological sign of Leo, again considered in astrology to be the sign ruled by the sun. The whole foundation of British culture and legend came from the Phoenicians. The famous legend of St. George and the Dragon comes from St. George of Cappadocia, the Phoenician center in Asia Minor. The battles. The Sanskrit word, svastai, which means well-being, and it was considered a positive symbol until the Nazis turned it around and made it a symbol of destruction. L.A. Waddell translated the markings on another stone in Scotland, the Newton stone in the Dumfries and Galloway region, to be Phoenician Hittite and dedicated to their sun god, Bel or Bil. The classic British symbol of Britannia comes from the Phoenician goddess, Baradi. Look at how the Phoenicians depicted Baradi and how the British depict Britannia in figure 12. One of the major centers of the Aryan Hittite Phoenicians was Cilicia in Asia Minor, and here Baradi was worshipped as Parathi and later Diana. So Diana and Britannia originate from the same source. Baradi was the queen goddess figure of the Phoenicians, as Berit was the god and king. These are possibly names for the Babylonian deities Nimrod and Semiramis. The royal elite clan of the Aans are called the Bharats, and this is why you find the term Bharat or Brit in the ancient Indian culture as you do with Britain and British, Bharat and Bharatish. The Indian Vedas say that King Bharat gave his name to the dynastic race of which he was the founder, and so it is from him that the fame of that dynastic people hath spread so wide. 35 Parat, Prat and Priti are some of the other derivatives of Bharat. The original form was Bharat Ana or Brithandana. 36 The suffix Ana in Hittite Sumerian, Aryan, means one. Ana in fact evolved into the English word one and the Scottish Ane. Bharat Ana or Britain therefore means one of the Bharats brutes. It is the same with many other countries occupied by this white race. The name Iran comes from the earlier Anyana or Aran, which means land of the Arays or Aryans. 37 The Indian Vedas also acknowledge the goddess Bharati, belonging to the Bharats, and she was known as Brid the Divine. They say her special place was on the Sarasvati River, which happens to be the Modem Sams River in the Hittite Phoenician land of Cilicia. The river entered the sea at Tarsus, the alleged home of St. Paul in the New Testament, a work written in accordance with Aryan sun myths. Also, these Phoenicians and Aryans worshipped the serpent, and the shape-shifting reptilians called the Nagas were the serpent gods of the Hindus. The Vedas, inspired by the Aryans, tell how the serpent humans, the Nagas, could cause fantastic damage and instant death. The Nagas were also said to have appeared at the birth of the man who became known as Buddha, and the serpent plays a part in the legend of Krishna. The Roman name for Bharati was Fortune, after her legend as the goddess of fortune. They depicted fortune in the same way as the Phoenicians symbolized figure 12, the Phoenician depiction of Bharati, right, and the British symbol of Britannia. They are the same deity and alternative names for Queen Semiramis in Babylon and Isis in Egypt. Bharati and the British do with Britannia. All were associated with water, as you expect with a seafaring race like the Phoenicians. The Egyptians, too, had a goddess called Birth, the goddess of the waters, and she was another mirror of Bharati because the Aryan Phoenicians were the force behind Egypt. Birth was described by a Babylonian emperor about 680 BC as a Phoenician god across the sea. 38 In Crete, another Phoenician center under the title Minoan, their goddess was Britomartis. She was a Phoenician goddess according to Greek and Roman legend, Bharati in other words, and the divine daughter of Phoenix, the king of Phoenicia. Britomartis became identified with the goddess Diana, a major deity of the ancient world, and like her she was armed for the hunt. As Earl Spencer made a point of emphasizing at the funeral of his sister Diana, Princess of Wales, she was named after the ancient goddess of hunting. The early British kings called themselves and their race the Cadi, and this appears on their coins. The Aryan Hittites of Asia Minor and Syria Phoenicia called themselves the Cadi or Kadi. The race of Aryans who left the Caucasus to rule India were known as the Kadayo. The term Kadi evolved through the Hebrew and English translations into the Hittites of the Old Testament. Cassi or Cassi was the title used by the first Phoenician dynasty about 3000 BC and was adopted by the Babylonian dynasty. Not surprising because these were different branches of the same people. The ancient Indian epic king lists name some of the same people named in the Mesopotamian king lists, and the predynastic civilizers of early Egypt also turn out to be of the Aryan race. We are looking at the same people here, no doubt whatsoever, and within this race are the reptilian bloodlines which have increasingly held the reins of power from the ancient world to the present day. As L.A. Waddell points out, the English, Scottish, Irish, Gaelic, Welsh, Gothic and Anglo-Saxon languages and their writing, and the entire family of Aryan languages, derive from the Aryan Phoenician language via the Hittite and Sumerian. About half of the commonest words used in the so-called English language today are of Sumerian, Cyprian or Hittite origin with the same sound and meaning. Sumerian, the language of the gods, is the parent language for most of the world, although I think it originated somewhere else even further back in history, maybe Atlantis or even the area today called the British Isles. As Waddell says, I had recognized that the various ancient scripts found at or near the old settlements of the Phoenicians, and those known as Cyprian, Carian, Aramaic or Syrian, Lycian, Lydian, Corinthian, Ionian, Cretan or Minoan, Pelasgian, Phrygian, Cappadocian, Cilician, Theban, Libyan, Celto-Albarian, Gothic runes etc., were all really local variations of the standard Aryan Hitto-Sumerian writing of the Aryan Phoenician mariners, those ancient pioneer spreaders of the Hittite civilization along the shores of the Mediterranean and out beyond the Pillars of Hercules to the British Isles. 39 Official history asks us to believe that the people of Britain were savages who were civilized only after the Romans came. This is not true, and in fact the Romans said the opposite. Roman records say that the Britons were generally civilized and their customs much the same as the Gauls. Of course they were. They were the same people with the same origins. The Britons used gold money and there was trade with the European continent, as British coins of the period found there have confirmed. It was only the people of the interior of Britain, still uninfluenced by the Phoenician culture closer to the coasts, whom the Romans regarded as uncivilized when they arrived. Many of the roads regarded as Roman were not built by the Romans at all. They were pre-Roman roads which they repaired. The Romans admired the efficiency of the British armies, particularly their use of war chariots. You won't be surprised to know by now that these famous British chariots were the same as those used by the Hittites or Kadi described by the Egyptian pharaoh Ramses II around 1295 BC at the Battle of Kadesh, a Hittite-Phoenician port. In about 350 BC, 3 centuries before the Romans arrived, the explorer and scientist, Pytheas, sailed around Britain and mapped the land scientifically with latitudes. Pytheas was a native of Phoca in Asia Minor, Phoca deriving from Phoenicia, as did an adjoining port called Phoenix. By this time the Phoenicians had organized the tin trade, from their mines in Cornwall in the west of England across Gaul France to Marseille, from where it was taken by sea to the lands of the Mediterranean and Aegean. The first Phoenician tin port in Cornwall was Icke or St. Michael's Mount in Penzance Bay. St. Michael, one of the great heroes of Christianity, was in truth a Phoenician deity. There is endless evidence to prove the ancient link between the British Isles and Ireland and the culture of North Africa and the Near East. They say if you want to expose corruption, follow the money. Well, if you want to identify the passage of people and cultures, follow the language. The Irish language today is English, which replaced Gaelic, and Gaelic itself evolved from a now lost earlier language. Gaelic-speaking missionaries in the Middle Ages had to use interpreters to communicate with the Paiutes, the ancient people of what became Scotland, and Cormac, a Gaelic-speaking Irish king of the 9th century, referred to the language of the people of Munster in southwest Ireland as the Iron language. But even Gaelic connects us very firmly into the Middle East. In Connemara, in the west of Ireland, is a community which still speaks Gaelic as its first language. Their Sean Knows old-style singing, the basis of all Irish music, is amazingly similar to the native songs of the Middle East. Even trained ears find it almost impossible to distinguish between the chants of the Gaelic singers and those of Libyans. Charles Acton, the music critic of the Irish Times, wrote, "If one listened for hours in the desert of an evening to Bedouin Arabs singing narrative epics, and then returned to Ireland and heard a fine Sean Knows singer using the same melismata and rhythm, one finds the resemblance almost uncanny." So too, if one listens to the Spanish canto Jondo 41, there were major sea trading routes between Ireland and Spain and North Africa in ancient times through which the passage of bloodlines, knowledge and culture was transported. The Spanish Arch in Galway in the west of Ireland commemorates this, as does the Connemara dancing known as the battering, which is virtually the same as Spanish flamenco. The stick dance performed by the Wexford mummers in Ireland is of North African origin. The word mummer comes from Mohammedan. The Irish symbol, the harp, came from North Africa, and so did the name of that other classic symbol of Ireland, the shamrock. Any three-leaf plant is known in Egypt as a shamrock. The rosary beads, the symbol of devout Roman Catholics, come from the Middle East and are still used by the Egyptians. The word nun is Egyptian and their garments are from the Middle East. According to Arbois de Juvainville, the author of a work called Cor de Literature Celtique, the Irish were known as Egyptians in the Middle Ages. There are obvious connections between Irish books and those of the Egyptians. They employ the same styles of illustration, and the colors used in the Irish Book of Kells and Book of Durrow are of Mediterranean origin. The red used in these books came from a Mediterranean insect, the Kermococcus vermo, and others came from a Mediterranean plant, the Chrysophora tinctoria. The crossed arms pose of many Egyptian portrayals of their god, Osiris, can be seen in Irish manuscripts. The Irish sweaters made on the Isle of Arran carry, according to at least one expert on the history of knitting, designs first given to them by Egyptian Coptic monks. 42. The main blood group of Aryan, is different from most of the Irish population. The old Irish sailing craft called Pucan was invented by the North Africans and used on the Nile. Excavations at Navan Fort, near Armagh City, found remains of the Barbary ape estimated to have lived about 500 BC. The Barbary ape today is mainly associated with Gibraltar, but its home in 500 BC was North Africa. Libyan dragon skins, mercenaries, were believed to have been at large in Ireland 2,000 years ago. In the 2nd century, the geographer Ptolemy, who lived in Alexandria, could name 16 tribes in Ireland. The Irish sport of hurling is mirrored by the game called tacourt in Morocco. Irish ritual was, like all the cultures inspired by the Phoenician Aryans, focused on the sun. The earth mound at Newgrange in Ireland has a narrow passageway of some 62 feet which is perfectly aligned with the sun as it rises on December 21st/22nd, the winter solstice. So much so that the golden sunlight fills and illuminates the whole passage and the chamber at the center. The entrance to structures in the Mediterranean, particularly the one at the Palace of Minos in Crete, are the same. The distinctive round towers of Ireland are, according to some Orientalists, of Venetian origin. 43 Again, all this fits perfectly into the story I am revealing here. The Phoenicians came from the Middle and Near East, one of the global centers for the Anunnaki reptilians, and, according to the research of Professor Philip Callahan I mentioned earlier, the round towers are aligned with star systems in the northern sky, especially Draco. The connections between Ireland and the Berbers of Morocco deserves a special mention. They are a light-skinned mountain people, some blue-eyed and blonde-haired. They are associated with the Atlas Mountains, which are themselves associated with Atlantis and named after Atlas, a son of the legendary ruler of Atlantis, Poseidon. Berber art has many similarities to the Irish version, and anyone speaking Gaelic could comfortably understand the Berber tongue. The main Berber clans like Emter, Emtuga and Emhill are obvious origins or derivatives of the Ireland-Scottish Mactir, MacDougall and Macill. The term Mac means children or child of, and the Arabs use the term Bini, as in Bini Emter, which means the same. Missionaries who first explored the lands of the Berbers found that they used bagpipes, as do the Irish and Scots. Early invaders of Ireland were known as the men with the leather bags. An Irish goatskin drum found in Kerry is a twin of the Moroccan drum, the bindir. The violin and the guitar also originate in North Africa. The Viking wing of the Aryans invaded Ireland and founded many towns, including the present capital city of Dublin. But, not surprisingly, in the light of the evidence you have been reading, the famous Viking galley with the high front and stem was a Phoenician design used by the Egyptians. Rock carvings at Newgrange appear to depict this design thousands of years earlier. The name Idris is well known in Wales, and the saints and kings of the Muslims have been called Idris for centuries. In the British Museum is a Muslim coin, a gold dinar, which has the name Offa stamped upon it. Offa was the king of Mercia in England in the 8th century, and he is said to have built the 120-mile earth wall between England and Wales known as Offa's Dyke. The name Wales comes from Wales, meaning land of foreigners. The Welsh, like the Irish, explored the northern waters around Iceland before the Vikings, and it is said that the Welshman Prince Madoc went ashore in America 3 centuries before Columbus. That's very possible, because if he had access to the knowledge of the Phoenicians, he would have known that the Americas were there. The Venerable Bede of Cimbri, approximately the Welsh, said they were an eastern people who migrated after the flood from the lands of the Bible to the British Isles. 44 When the Irish settled in parts of Wales and Cornwall, some of the displaced people moved to Amrarica, now Brittany, on the French coast. There you find the fantastic forest of standing stones called Karnak, a name which comes from Karnak in Egypt. The Breton language is a mixture of Old Welsh and Cornish Aryan. Brittany means Little Britain and relates again to Barrett and Barati. Amorica means land facing the sea, a perfect description of America approached from the Atlantic. This is surely the true origin of the name America, and not Amerigo Vespucci, the explorer from Florence who was the contractor for Christopher Columbus in Spain. The Isle of Man was also populated by the Irish Aryans, and it became a very sacred land. It was one of 2 places in Britain. Angelisa in North Wales was other, where the Archdruids were based. These were the highest-ranked members of the ancient British priestly class, who inherited their knowledge from the Phoenicians and later the Babylonian Brotherhood. The Isle of Man's 3-legged symbol is not unlike that ancient Phoenician symbol for the sun, the swastika. Irish connections with Ethiopia have also been identified. An American researcher, Winthrop Palmer Boswell, wrote a book called Irish Wizards in the Woods of Ethiopia, in which she showed the similarities between Irish and Ethiopian folk stories. The baobab tree is held in great reverence by Ethiopians and Berbers, and Bamba is an old name for Ireland. This reverence for trees in North Africa was expressed in the British Isles and Europe by the Druids and the giant or Titan race. The reptilian-human crossbreeds of the ancient Near East were often symbolized as trees because of their height. In his 1833 book, Phoenician Ireland, Joachim de Villeneuve insisted that Irish Druids were the snake priests of the Phoenician seafarers. This would certainly explain the origin of the Bower of the Evil Eye, the Irish version of the North African god Baal, and the celebration in May of the Baal ritual, Beltane. The Evil Eye relates to the hypnotic stare of the reptilians. The sun god of the Phoenicians was Bel or Bil, and later became known by the Canaanites and Babylonians as Baal Nimrod. The Druids became the carriers of the mystery school tradition in Britain, Ireland and France, or Britannia, Era and Gaul as they were then called, and some of them became deeply corrupted by the influence of the reptile-human bloodlines of the Babylonian Brotherhood, which established control of the Aryan priesthood as the centuries passed. The origin of the word druid is not certain. A Gaelic word, druid, means a wise man or a sorcerer, but it may come from the Irish word, druid, which means men of the oak trees. 45 The Druidic mysteries were taught in the darkness of caves, forests and groves, with the oak tree symbolizing their supreme deity, very much in line with the watcher tree symbolism. They did not worship the oak tree, it was a symbol, and anything which grew upon it, like mistletoe, became sacred. The holly bush was another sacred symbol of the Druids, and this is where we get the name Hollywood in Los Angeles, the center of the global film industry, which was created by modern initiates of the Babylonian Brotherhood. It has remained in their control, and Hollywood is one of their most important vehicles for mass mind conditioning. Hollywood is indeed a place of magic, as it casts a spell on humanity's perception of itself and the world. The Druids knew about astrology and astronomy, and they celebrated the birth of the sun on December 25th. The moon was also very important to them. Particularly sacred was the night of the new moon, the sixth day, and the full moon. As with the blue degrees of modern Freemasonry, the demon initiates were divided into 3 groups. The teachings given to each level in the forest groves of ancient times and the Freemasonic temples of today are virtually the same. The first level of the Druid school was the Ophate, who was dressed in green, the Druidic color for learning. The second was the Bard, who wore sky blue, representing harmony and truth. They had the task of memorizing some of the 20,000 verses of Druidic poetry within which the mysteries were hidden. The third, the Demid, would be dressed in a white robe, their symbolic color for purity and the sun. To become an archdruid, a spiritual leader, you had to pass 6 levels of degree. The Druids had total power over the population for a long time, and some deeply unpleasant rituals emerged after their mystery school network was taken over by the Babylonian Brotherhood. The basic moral code was taught to all people, but the secret knowledge was, as with all these networks, preserved for initiates under the strictest secrecy. Eliphas Levi, the famous esotericist, said of their healing methods: the Druids were priests and physicians, curing by magnetism. Their universal remedies were mistletoe and serpent's eggs, because these substances attract astral light in a special manner. The solemnity with which mistletoe was cut down drew upon this plant the popular confidence and rendered it powerfully magnetic. 46 The Druids, like the other mystery religions, were carriers of advanced knowledge which has been kept from the people, and some of them used it for less than positive reasons. I am not condemning the Druids as a whole, and I certainly do not wish to cast a negative interpretation on the work of modern Druids. Knowledge is neutral, and the same knowledge can be used with good or malevolent intent. But there is no doubt that the Druidic religion was infiltrated and began to manifest the classic rituals and behavior of the reptilians, including human sacrifice. The Brotherhood today still uses Druidic rituals and its own black magic ceremonies. Going home. The evidence of the connections between the Middle Near East and the British Isles and Ireland is simply enormous. You can follow the flow of peoples, knowledge, culture, language, deities, symbols and rituals very comfortably. I wonder, however, if this was all traveling between these 2 areas of the world for the first time from around 3000 BC, or whether, in the ancient past before the Phoenix Cataclysm, it had all gone in the reverse direction. Could it be that the origins of the Middle Near East cultures had actually been in what became the British Isles and Europe, and after 3000 BC it was taken in the reverse direction? I can't present detailed evidence of this at the moment, but my research is moving that way. If the British Isles and parts of Europe were badly affected by earth upheavals, maybe there was a mass movement of the advanced race from many parts of the world to safer lands, particularly in the Near East. Certainly, the Babylonian Brotherhood and others with advanced knowledge were very keen to make their way to Britain and establish their headquarters there. London became the epicenter of their operations, and it remains so to this day. There must be a very important reason for that, and I think it relates to the energy fields in these lands. The British Isles is a really sacred place to the Brotherhood because it is the center of the Earth's energy grid. It is not without reason that there is a greater concentration of stone circles, standing stones, ancient mounds and sites, in areas of Britain than in almost anywhere else in the world. Those who understand how to manipulate energy and consciousness would seek to base their activities at the heart center of the planetary energy grid, and they have done this by operating so much of their agenda from the British Isles. London is also a major site on the Earth's magnetic grid, and it became the capital not only of Britain or Barrett land, but also of the Babylonian Brotherhood. To them, it is their New Troy or New Babylon. The city of Troy in Asia Minor, the place made famous by the Trojan Wars and the wooden horse legend, was another Aeon center. It was the old capital of the Hittites. Many of the reptile Aryan bloodlines appear to have been based in Troy, and it remains a sacred place for those at the upper levels of the secret society network who are aware of their true origins. Troy or Troy means three places in Greek and Hebrew, an allusion to the Trinity. Another believe that Christianity has stolen from the ancient world. In English, Troy or Troy is Tripoli, the name of the capital of Libya today and home to that Brotherhood frontman, Colonel Gaddafi. Once again, Troy relates to the extraterrestrial full-bloods and crossbreeds, hence the constant obsession with that name by the Brotherhood. In the Iliad epic, believed to have been written by the Greek poet Homer, it states that Troy was founded by Dardanus, the son of the Greek god Zeus, who was a Titan, the reptilian bloodline. Zeus was depicted as both an eagle and a serpent. He was said to have been born in Arcadia, in Sparta, and after the Trojan War many Spartans migrated into what is now France. Terms like New Troy, therefore, relate to centers for these same bloodlines. Most people don't realize that London was founded as the New Troy. After the destruction of Troy around 1200 BC, the story goes that Aeneas, born of a royal bloodline, fled with the remnants of his people and settled in Italy. There he married the daughter of Latinus, the king of the Latins, and through this line later emerged the Roman Empire. According to many traditions, the grandson of Aeneas, a man called Brutus, landed in Britain around 1103 BC with a group of Trojans, including some from colonies in Spain. They referred to Britain as the Great White Island after the white cliffs which abound on the south coast. In the southwest of England is the town of Totnes in Devon, a short distance inland from Torbay, the oldest seaport in the area. Here there is a stone called the Brutus Stone on which, the legend says, the former Trojan prince stood after he first landed. Welsh records say that Brutus was met by 3 tribes of Britons who proclaimed him king. Brutus founded a city he called Car Troy, New Troy. The Romans would later call it Londinium. London became the operational center of the empire of the Babylonian Brotherhood, and it still is, along with Paris and the Vatican. In the King Arthur stories, London or New Troy is Troynovant, King Arthur's eastern gateway city, and King Arthur's Camelot apparently means Martian city or city of Mars. Artifacts discovered by the German archaeologist Heinrich Schliemann at the site of ancient Troy contain many of the markings found on British megalithic stones. They were also decorated with the swastika, the Phoenician Aryan symbol of the sun. Once again, they were the same people. All the white peoples are, and it is the white race which has taken over the world, quite demonstrably. Just look around you at who controls all the reins of global power. White people. And within this race and others, going back to antiquity, are the reptile bloodlines who are today centered on London, New Troy, or more appropriately New Babylon. The bodies of these elite bloodlines are occupied or controlled by the reptiles of the lower 4th dimension, and most of the lesser Aryan hierarchy have no idea that this is so. I will focus on this reptilian and Anunnaki network and chart it into the modern world when we have considered the truth about the religions which the reptilians have used so effectively to batter the human race into mental, emotional, and spiritual submission. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 76. Sources: Brian Desborough, The Great Pyramid Mystery. Ibid. 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 Jeffrey Higgins, Anacatypsis, first published 1836, republished in 1972 by Health Research, P0 Box 850, Pomeroy, WA, USA 99347, Volume 1, P368. The Great Pyramid Mystery. Ibid. 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 First Book of Enoch, 7-2-6. The Universe, Life National Picture Library, Time Life International, Netherlands, 1964, pp 8594. Ibid. Ibid. Adrian G. Gilbert and Maurice M. Cotterell, The Mayan Prophecies, Element Books, Shaftesbury, England, 1995. Quoted in The Occult Conspiracy p. 28. Manly R. Hall, The Secret Teachings of All Ages, The Philosophical Research Society, Los Angeles, California, 1988, pi. From the Ashes of Angels, p. 93. L. A. Waddell, The Phoenician Origin of Britons, p. 11. Ibid, p. 13. Captain Raymond, missing links discovered in Assyrian tablets, Artisan Sales, Thousand Oaks, California, 1985, p. 145. The Phoenician Origins of Britons, p. 48. Ibid, p. 39. Ibid, p. 40. Michael Hesseman, The Cosmic Connection, Gateway Books, Wellow, Avon, England, 1996, p. 107. The Phoenician Origin of Britons, p. 231. 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 77. Richard Hoagland, Monuments on Mars, North Atlantic Books, California, USA, 1996. The Cosmic Connection, p. 108. The Great Pyramid Mystery, Rig Veda. The Phoenician Origin of Britons, p. 65. Ibid. Ibid, p. 62. Ibid, p. 27. Ibid, p. 54. Bob Quinn, Atlantine, Ireland's North African and Maritime Heritage, Quartet Books, London, 1986, p. 19. A very good summary of the evidence connecting Ireland with North Africa. Heinz Edgar Keim, The Sacred History of Knitting, quoted in Atlantine, pp. 159,160. Atlantine, p. 30. Steve Jones, In the Blood, HarperCollins, London, 1966, p. 126. The Secret Teachings of All Ages, ppxxilxxi2 Ibid. Chapter 4 The Sons of God. Nothing has served the reptilian agenda more than religion. Still today in America, religion controls the minds and limits the thinking of the Christian patriot movement, which has seen through many other smokescreens and identified many aspects of the Brotherhood conspiracy. What they cannot face, however, is that their own religion is a massive part of that conspiracy. That is not to condemn all people who call themselves Christian. There are many who express a loving spirituality through their Christian beliefs. I am talking of the institution of Christianity and its arrogant indoctrination and imposition of its desperately limited vision of life, which has created a mind prison for literally billions of people over almost 2,000 years. All the world's major religions, Hinduism, Christianity, Judaism and Islam, came out of the very same region of the Middle and Near East from which the Aryan race and the reptile crossbreeds emerged after the cataclysm of perhaps 7,000 years ago. These religions were designed to imprison the mind and engulf the emotions with fear and guilt. They were usually based on some savior god figure like Jesus or Mohammed, and only by believing in them and following their dictates can we find God and be saved. That is precisely what the Babylonian priests said about Nimrod when the blueprint for control by religion was being molded in Babylon. Those who refuse to believe this hogwash are condemned to stoke the fires of hell for all eternity. Staggeringly, billions upon billions have fallen for this scam over thousands of years, and still do. That's fine if they want to give their minds and their lives away, but many insist that everyone else must do the same, and that's not fine. Seriously, not fine. Most of the people reading this book will be from the parts of the world dominated by Christianity and Judaism, and so I shall take those as the main examples of how symbolic stories have become literal truths and how the manipulation of these stories has produced the most powerful form of mass mind control yet invented. To understand the true background to the religions, we need to appreciate the basis of all ancient religion going back to the Phoenicians, the Babylonians and beyond. It was the sun. The hierarchy focused on the sun because, as I outlined earlier, they understood its true power as an amazing generator of electromagnetic energy which is affecting our lives and behavior every second of every day. The sun contains 99% of the mass of this solar system. Just think about that. The sun is the solar system, and when it changes, we change. Understanding these sun cycles, and the changing nature of the energy it projects, allows you to anticipate how human beings are most likely to. Figure 13, the ancient symbol for the annual cycle of the sun from which so many symbols and symbolic stories have originated. You can see this symbol in the depictions of Bharati and Britannia in Figure 12. React to various events at different times. As with the texts that form the basis of the various religions, there are two levels of knowledge in sun worship. In the ancient world, the hierarchy focused on the sun because they knew its effect at a deep level, while the masses worshipped the sun because its heat and light had an obvious and crucial role in ensuring an abundant harvest. In the same way, an initiate of the esoteric knowledge will read the Bible differently to a Christian or Jewish believer. The initiate will recognize the symbolism, the numerology and the esoteric codes, while the believer takes the text literally, so the same text acts as a means of passing on esoteric knowledge to the initiated and creates a prison religion for the masses who are not initiated. Great scam. To understand the ancient sun symbolism is to understand the major religions. In the ancient world they used one particular symbol, see figure 13, for the sun's journey through the year. As we will see in a later chapter, this is still a fundamental symbol used by the Babylonian Brotherhood. It symbolized both the Phoenician depictions of Barati and was on the shield of her British expression, Britannia. The ancients took the circle of the zodiac, a Greek word meaning animal circle, and inserted a cross to mark the 4 seasons. At the center of the cross, they placed the sun. So many of the pre-Christian deities were said to have been born on December 25th because of this symbolism. On December 21st–22nd, you have the winter solstice when, in the northern hemisphere, the sun is at the lowest point of its power in the annual cycle. The sun, the ancients said, had symbolically died. By December 25th, the sun had demonstrably begun its symbolic journey back to the summer and the peak of its power. The ancients, therefore, said that the sun was born on December 25th. The Christian Christmas is merely a renamed pagan festival, as indeed are all Christian festivals. Easter is another. About March 25th, the old fixed date for Easter, the sun enters the astrological sign of Aries, the ram or the lamb. At this time the ancients used to sacrifice lambs because they believed this would appease the gods, most notably the sun god, and ensure abundant harvests. In other words, they believed that the blood of the lamb would mean that their sins would be forgiven. In ancient Babylon, Tammuz, the son of Queen Semiramis, was said to have been crucified with a lamb at his feet and placed in a cave. When a rock was rolled away from the cave's entrance 3 days later, his body had disappeared. I've definitely heard that somewhere before. The ancients also symbolized the sun as a baby in December, a youth at Easter, a strapping, immensely strong man in the summer, an aging man losing his power in the autumn, and an old man by the winter solstice. The modem depiction of old father time is a version of this. They also symbolized the sun as having long golden hair, sun rays, which got shorter as he lost his power in the months of autumn. Now look again at the Old Testament story of Samson. Samson, he was incredibly strong and had long hair, but he lost his power when his hair was cut. The problem started when he entered the house of Delilah, the astrological house of Virgo, the Virgin, through which the sun passes as autumn approaches. Summoning his last burst of power, Sam the sun pushes down the 2 pillars, which are classic brotherhood symbolism going back at least to ancient Egypt and are still used by the Freemasons today. Samson is Samson, a symbolic story of the sun's annual cycle. There wasn't any such person. In Hebrew, Samson means I understand, the God of the sun. To the Orthodox Christian, Jesus is the only begotten Son of God who died so our sins could be forgiven. But you will find exactly the same claims for a stream of gods in the ancient world long before the name of Jesus was even heard of. Indeed, we know his name wasn't Jesus because that's a Greek translation of a Hebrew name. The term Son of God would seem to originate at least as far back as the Aryan Gothic kings of Cilicia who took the title Son of the Sun God, a tradition adopted by the pharaohs of Egypt. One to many in the New Age, Jesus is Sananda, a high initiate of some spiritual hierarchy who incarnated to infuse the earth with the Christ energy. Or, depending on who you talk to, he was an extraterrestrial on a similar mission. To others he was claiming to be the king of the Jews by right of his King David bloodline. But did Jesus actually exist? Did Moses, Solomon and King David exist? I would say categorically no. There is no credible evidence for the existence of any of them outside the biblical texts, and they are certainly not credible. So where did they come from? The Old Testament in 721 BC, it appears that Israel was overrun by the Assyrians and the Israelites or Canaanites were taken into captivity. However, the tribes known by official history as Judah and Benjamin survived for more than 100 years after that, before they were conquered and captured by our friends, the Babylonians, in around 586 BC. It was in Babylon, that ancient capital city of the reptile Aryan priesthood and hierarchy, that the Hebrew priests, the Levites, began to create a manufactured history which obscured the truth of what really happened. I mean, ask yourself, is a brotherhood who arranged for the destruction of ancient knowledge and libraries all over the world going to write down the true history in their texts, or are they going to produce the version they want the people to believe? During and after their stay in Babylon, with its wealth of inherited knowledge and stories from Sumer, the Levites mixed truth, often symbolic truth, with fantasies, and this concoction became the foundations of the Old Testament. The so-called Israelites did not write these texts or agree with what they said. Even if you accept they even existed, the Israelites had long dispersed by the time the Levites inked their pens. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus and Numbers, which together make up the Jewish Torah, were all written by the Levites or under their supervision during or after their period in Babylon. This bunch of human sacrificing, blood-drinking fanatics and black magicians, who you would not trust to tell you the time, compiled the law which Jewish people to this day are supposed to follow. Likewise, many Christian fanatics quote this stuff as the word of God. It is not the word of God, it is the word of the Levites under the direction of the reptile full-bloods and crossbreeds of the Babylonian Brotherhood. The Sumerian tablets prove beyond question that Genesis was a much edited and condensed version of Sumer records. The Sumerian story of Eden became the Levites' biblical Garden of Eden. Remember the story of Moses's being found in the bulrushes by the Egyptian princess. The same tale was told by the Sumerians Babylonians about King Sargon the Elder. The story of Moses is make-believe, as is the Egyptian captivity, the Exodus, at least in the form described, and also the creation of the 12 tribes via Jacob. These texts were written by the Levites, the heads of which were reptilian mystery school initiates in Babylon. Their stories are symbolic and coded for initiates to understand and the masses to take literally. According to the Levites, Moses was given his laws and commandments by God on top of a mountain. Again and again we see the symbol of mountains. One reason for this is that the top of a mountain is closer to their symbol of God, the sun. Mount Sion means sun mountain. The sun rising over the eastern mountains is still a major brotherhood symbol today. The story of the Israelites and Jews is largely a fantasy, the veil behind which the truth has been hidden. No one has been had more comprehensively over these thousands of years than the people who have considered themselves Jewish. They have been terrorized, used and manipulated in the most merciless and grotesque fashion by their hierarchy to advance an agenda which the Jewish people in general have not even begun to identify. There is no greater example of this manipulation than the way the reptilian bloodlines like the Jewish Rothschilds funded and supported the Nazis and allowed the rank-and-file Jewish people to reap the unspeakable consequences. The Levite story of Exodus is a smokescreen to hide the fact that the Hebrew knowledge was stolen from the Egyptian mystery schools after they were infiltrated by the Babylonian Brotherhood. The Egyptians considered the Jehovah revelation to be a robbery committed against the sacred sciences. To Manly P. Hall, the Freemasonic historian and initiate, said that black magic dictated the state religion in Egypt and that the intellectual and spiritual activities of the people were paralyzed by complete obedience to the dogma formulated by the priestcraft. What a perfect description of the Levite Babylonian mode of manipulation and of all the religions, like Christianity, which were to emerge from the lies they peddled. And that's a crucial point to remember. Judaism, Christianity and Islam all base their beliefs on these same stories written by the Levites after their stay in Babylon. We are looking at a point in history which was to define and control the world from then until now. The knowledge the Levites stole from Egypt and expanded as a result of their stay in Babylon became known as the Kabbalah, which comes from the Hebrew root, kubal, meaning mouth to ear. This is the method used to communicate the most secret information to initiates. The Kabbalah is the esoteric stream of what is called Judaism, which in fact is a front for the Babylonian Brotherhood, as is the Vatican. The Kabbalah is the secret knowledge hidden in codes within the Old Testament and other texts. Judaism is the literal interpretation of it. This is a technique you can see in all the religions. An example of the Levite coding is the names of the 5 scribes, Gariah, Dabriah, Tzelemiah, Eshnu and Israel, in the second book of Esdras or Ezra. The names and their true meanings are: Gariah, marks which ancient scribes used to indicate that the text is either defective or has another meaning. Dabriah, words comprising a phrase or text. Tzelemiah, figures, something figured or indicated in an obscure manner. Eshnu, something which has been changed or doubled. Israel, the name of Esdras/Ezra, the suffix el meaning the work of Ezra. These 5 names for scribes therefore read as one phrase to an initiate, marks of warning of the words figured in an obscure manner which have been changed or doubled, which is the work of Ezra. 4. There is a book called the Bible Code 5 which claims to have identified a code in the Hebrew version of the Old Testament which predicts the future. As one of these codes predicted that Lee Harvey Oswald would kill President Kennedy, you'll excuse me if I remain extremely unconvinced about its credibility. Is there anyone left who still believes that Oswald killed Kennedy? But while I question claims in the Bible code, there is a code in the Bible, an esoteric code for initiates. They either made up characters to fit their symbolism or fakely based them on living people who they usually massively misrepresented. Here are some examples of codes in the Bible. A common theme in all mystery school traditions is of 12 disciples, knights or followers surrounding a deity. The number 12 is a code, among other things, for the 12 months of the year and the houses of the zodiac through which symbolically travels the sun, the god, symbolized as 13. This is the sacred 12 and 1 as some people describe it, and it is one major reason why the numbers 12 and 13 keep recurring. Thus you have the 12 tribes of Israel, 12 princes of Ishmael, 12 disciples or followers of Jesus, Buddha, Osiris and Quetzalcoatl. There is also King Arthur and his 12 knights of the Round Table, the Zodiac Circle, Himmler and his 12 knights in the Nazi SS, and the woman Isis, Semiramis, with a crown of 12 stars in the Book of Revelation. In Scandinavia and that whole northern region you find the Odin mysteries, again inspired by the same Aryan race from the Near East. In this tradition, you find 12 Tritars presiding over the mysteries with Odin. The sacred 12 and 1 again. These stories are not literally true, they are mystery school symbolism. This continues today with these same symbols used by the Brotherhood secret society network in national flags, coats of arms, advertising and company logos. That Brotherhood creation, the European Union, has a circle of 12 stars as its symbol. We are talking sacred numbers and geometry here. The proportions of Egyptian statues, whether big or small, were multiples or submultiples of 12 or 6. The numbers 7 and 40 are also code numbers in the Bible and the mysteries. So in the Bible we have 7 spirits of God, the 7 churches of Asia, 7 golden candlesticks, 7 stars, 7 lamps of fire, 7 seals, 7 trumpets, 7 angels, 7 thunders and the red dragon in Revelation with 7 heads and 7 crowns. The story of Jericho has Joshua marching his army around the city for 7 days, accompanied by 7 priests carrying 7 trumpets. On the 7th day they circled Jericho 7 times and the walls came tumbling down. In the story of Noah, 7 pairs of each animal go into the ark and 7 pairs of each type of bird. There are 7 days between the prediction of the deluge and the rain and 7 days between the sending of the doves. The ark comes to rest on the 17th day of the 7th month. Noah leaves the ark on the 27th day, and after the flood he begins his 7th century. Many of the names for the symbolic deities, such as Abraxas of the Gnostics and Serapis of Greece, have 7 letters. Then there is 40. Adam enters paradise when he is 40 years old, Eve follows 40 years later. During the Great Flood it rains for 40 days and 40 nights. Seth is carried away by angels when he is 40 and is not seen for 40 days. Moses is 40 when he goes to Midian and he stays for 40 years. Joseph is 40 years old when Jacob arrives in Egypt. Jesus goes into the wilderness for 40 days. The Bible is the Word of God. No, it is written in the esoteric code of the mystery schools. The Arabian literature was also compiled by and for initiates of the mysteries, and here you find the same codes. The Arbaint, the 40s, are stories which all relate to the number 40, and their calendar has 40 rainy and 40 windy days. Their laws constantly refer to 40. Another series of Arabian books, the Sab'at or 7, are based on that number. These number codes have even deeper meanings than the more obvious ones of days, months and the zodiac. Numbers also represent vibrational frequencies. Every frequency resonates to a certain number, color and sound. Some frequencies, represented by numbers, colors and sounds, are particularly powerful. Symbols also represent frequencies and they affect the subconscious without the person realizing it is happening. This is another reason why certain symbols are seen in secret societies, national flags, company logos, advertising and so on. There is no historical evidence for the existence of a man called Moses except in the texts produced by the Levalts and other writings and opinions stimulated by those texts.